So the one thing that I was really interested in having happen was having that manufacturing B&O tax rolled back to give us parity to what the aerospace sector gets. And as you might remember, last year in the budget, that was actually in the budget to do, and then the governor vetoed that section out of there. And so we worked real hard trying to get that back in this year because we had $2.3 billion of extra revenue that was coming in, that actually $1.3 billion since we left town last year. And then we didn't get the energy tax. There was polling done, in fact, across the state for that energy tax, and if most people basically was going to add another 30 cents to the gallon of our gas, and about 70% of the people said no, no way. So, but they're continuing to push that. It's one of the governor's important issues, I guess.
So, with that, last session I had one bill pass. And didn't introduce a tremendous amount of bills because I was new. So this year, thanks to constituent feedback, as well as some things that had been on my heart, trying to help protect homeowners, look out for farmers' interests, veterans, business in particular. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I introduced, as a result, 2 pages of bills and got 0 passed. So. I think it's interesting because, I've been really fortunate. Last year, I was really fortunate to start a bipartisan caucus to help work on sex trafficking prevention. That sex trafficking caucus is about 10 people, truly bipartisan. Can we all just agree that's a big issue, right? So we're all going to just go tackle it. So bipartisanship is extremely important, and being able to work well, across the aisle, absolutely. One of my top priorities was at the top, HB 2350. It's a small business bill, basically to help small businesses by raising the B&O tax exemption threshold. So what it does is it literally just increases that tax exemption for small business from $28,000, which is today's standard, to $35,000 for most businesses. And then service businesses actually have it increased to $58,000. So really what it was a cost of inflation update. The bill is originally took place about 30 years ago, had been updated, probably about 15 years ago.
Not a big bill writer, never have been. Kind of got into politics because I believe actually less government in your life sometimes is better. Less regulation is better sometimes. I want to be very careful when I regulate. I sit on the boards of SHARE, and I sit on the boards of Columbia River Mental Health. I spent all day yesterday touring the sites where Columbia River Mental Health represents in our area, their facilities. I believe of legislation that we did this year, we need to look at mental health more and what we can do for those who have needs in our community. I think they're underserved, and they're people that actually have homeless issues and also are mentally ill. We have serious needs in our community, and it's one of the issues I'm very passionate on and will continue. The important thing that I did this session, the 8 years that I've been a legislator, is that I've had the McCleary decision in my life where the Supreme Court has said that we are not fully funding education properly. I sat on the task force of 8 that developed the McCleary decision of how we would fund that. And we this year, the one thing that the Supreme Court came back and said was that everything we did was great except we didn't fully fund it this year, and that we were short 800, we can dicker between 700 and $1 billion, okay? And so we funded that this year. And I sit on the Article 9 committee. We will meet on April 2nd. I've been briefed on that for what we will tell to the Supreme Court. And I believe for the first time in my lifetime as a legislator that I will have the Supreme Court out of my life on the McCleary decision, and that we have fully funded basic education in the state. Now, do I think everybody's going to be happy? Of course not. I've already sat down with the WEA, and they're not happy. They would differ that we have fully funded it, but I believe that we have. To be really personal, I think we're part-time legislators, all of us. And I think that's what the people in our district want. You don't want full-time legislators. You want people that come back, that live in your community, that have other jobs, that live a life just like you do, and to see how government impacts their lives. I don't want to be up there for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. I really don't. My wife's here and my daughter. I have a wife and kids and grandkids, and I want to go home, and just like you do, and I want to live. So a very small portion of the lottery funds. Initially, the lottery was supposed to go entirely to education, and you're right, it does not now. Okay? Why?
Somewhere along the line, legislature chose to do that. It hasn't changed since I've been there, but, so it was before that.
And I'll make a comment on that, just as a newer legislator. One of the things that I think is interesting is when there's a need, a lot of times an account will get set up, but then something else might come along, like McCleary, right? McCleary was essentially, I'll say, handed over or dumped over to the legislature by the Washington State Supreme Court. When they put a mandate on the legislature saying you must fully fund this, the unfortunate reality is sometimes accounts that were dedicated for something else get looked at as, okay, we have some revenue, we can move it over here to what we've now been given as the highest priority. So that is an unfortunate reality, and we would rather not have that happen, but.
It happens all the time.
It-
The sweeping of funds.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it was, I think, how it works in Washington State, when we get to the end of the year budget cycle, and all the monies are swept from all accounts, and they go to the general fund, basically to fund whatever's left. So you might not like to hear that, but that's reality. I mean, reality is there's not going to be a crumb left anywhere, and they're going to spend it. I would caveat an income tax, if you're going to give me an income tax, then you get rid of something else. You offset it somewhere, and I mean a serious offset. Okay? Because this state, I want to understand, we had $1.3 billion more last year. We do not have a problem with revenue in this state. We have tons of money. We have put $6.3 billion into education in the last 3 years. More money. We are not hurting for dollars. Okay, I want to make sure you understand that. We had the largest increase in revenue in this year than we have had in the last 15 years. 14% more money. As I turn to certain people, how many of us had 14% more money in the last year?
I want to tell you something. So you're right. Value pricing is happening up in the Seattle area, and they have had nothing but problems. It gets up to $10 to ride in that toll
So explain what
lane.
value pricing is.
Well, value pricing is basically you price up you charge to travel the lane, and you pay more so that less people are on it because you're willing to pay for it. So, and let me tell you something, Richard, I don't know any legislator over here that is in agreement with what they're doing. It is Oregon, and we can't affect their Oregon laws.
My only
okay?
disagreement is, I certainly wouldn't want Oregon coming into my state and telling me what I'm gonna do. So is it Oregon law that they can influence their roads? I hate to say it, I'm a Republican that believes local control, that's state control. Jamie Herrera Butler, I believe, will stand up on the right side of this issue. But seriously, huh?
She has.
Yeah, seriously, I can yell and scream as loud as you, but I don't think it's going to make any difference.
Well,
That I don't want Oregon coming into my state and telling me what I'm going to do.
Those are interstate highways.
Those are interstate
They
highways.
belong to the federal government and the people. Oregon doesn't have the right to tell us we can't use our roads.
Well, and that's true, and I'll just say one quick thing on this also, and then there's a few other questions. So we all signed a letter, along with Jamie Herrera Butler, to say, no, this is not acceptable. So we did that, in session, because that's about as much as we could do at that moment.
So I think I had one of the most interesting bills that came out, that the bill didn't pass, but the money to do the bill actually got implemented in the budget. And
Which bill are we
well, no, I
There
want to
were
make
so
sure
many
that,
bills.
so 2242 actually, I believe most of our school shootings, so there's going to be a lot of protesting today on guns. I find it fascinating that the most critical individual in all these school shootings is actually you, the student. The student in every school knew beforehand the climate of the school, what was going on in almost every one of these shootings. one of the students knew about it and so what this particular bill did, the bill didn't pass, but the money was funded to do the bill, so I believe we will actually have it. The bill was $22.42. It costs 75 cents a year for every student to have an app, and that app it keeps you completely anonymous. You can text, you can voice. There's several ways for you to activate that, and you can send an anonymous message to a third party that immediately sends it to the school district that you feel, one, that I've heard something in my school that I'm concerned about, or I know Susie or Johnny is going to do something. And that bill didn't pass, but the money to put the 75 cents, the $750,000 was funded. I believe that's the most important bill, the most important funding that took place in the state, because I find it odd that the kids are up screaming, and I've received tons of emails on it. My concern was not a one of them mentioned that each one of those students could have done something. Each one of those students could have said something. Or each one of those students was involved, as my daughter played me this morning, in maybe perhaps alienating a student, bullying a student, making the student feel not acceptable. To me, it's unbelievable that we in our society, we have to teach our youth the importance of acceptance, especially in this society, of everyone. No matter if you're different, no matter if you're gay, if you look different, if you talk different, if you don't appear the same, we need to accept everybody. And we need to teach our youth to do that. But we certainly need to teach them to make sure that if they hear something or they see something, that it's acceptable to report that.
Community problem, we know that.
Yeah.
And you've got, in this case, which why we're talking about it now, right now, is the Parkland shootings. You had the FBI fail, you had the police fail 33 times. You had the neighbors knew that this man, who was 19 years old, had problems. The school knew they had problems. They told the teachers not to let him come into this classroom with a backpack on. There was multitude of failures here. And so I think that if any one of them had stepped up and done something, we wouldn't have had this tragedy occur.
We proposed an amendment on the House operating budget, that would have actually provided $30 million. Frankly, we had enough money, we could have done more, but at least $30 million for a school resource officer to be put in the schools. Frankly, do we want to have to do that? No, but until we get some more, some practical solutions, mental health, making sure some of those other processes are in place, that actually was the thing that in Maryland, right, just prevented more students from being, basically protected more students, I'll say it that way, right, saved lives. And so those are some easy things. That would have been the easiest thing for us to just pass that, and immediately we could have had school resource officers step it up and get more protection. Because the reality is, if you have a person that's mentally unstable or just a bad intended person and they get a hold of any weapon, you need somebody who can counter that quickly.
Somebody with an AR-15, you don't even have to aim an AR-15. You just point and shoot, and you keep shooting.
But
that's
do you
ridiculous.
understand that an AR-15 shoots just like the one you're talking about, the handgun? You pull the trigger and one bullet comes out.
Yeah, but you're talking about one bullet
No,
versus
look,
10 bullets in a second.
No, not a second. It's as fast as your finger can pull it. And then you said capacity. Sure, well, there's handguns out there that have 13 to 17 rounds.
Good man.
Well, have you shot a high-powered handgun?
Pardon me?
High-powered handgun, a 40 or 44 or 45?
Yes, I'm a certified firearms instructor.
Okay, so you have to practice with that.
I have practiced.
AR-15 you don't have to practice with.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It's a firearm like every other firearm. In fact, the bullet that an AR-15 uses is a .223 or a .556. Right now in the state of Washington, those are not powerful enough to even kill a deer. You're not allowed in Washington state to use that gun to go hunt with.
That's insane to use it for hunting.
Pardon me, I know, but if you're talking about a deer and it won't kill the deer, it may kill it or it may not kill it, but then it winds up in
Yeah,
pain
it's
and all
not-
that. So that's why they won't allow you to use that, because it's not powerful
There's
enough
no
to
point for an
use.
assault weapon on the open market.
I want to put something out that kind of goes back to what we talked about early in this conversation, because I think it is really the key, in my opinion. Because we're talking about the weapon, and you can change out the weapon, but it is the person behind that weapon that is the difference in what takes place. And in law, I'll make a quick plug for some of the friends in the room here, a civics education bill was passed this year. And sounds like it doesn't relate. I'm going to relate it right back. As part of that civics education bill, the reason I really voted for it is because it's based on an RCW, a law already in place today. It came onto the books in Washington in 1994, and if we really taught this law in our schools, we would not have this problem. Just a brief summary of it. Values and traits. 28A.150.211 is the RCW. Here's how the RCW reads. It starts, honesty, teach honesty, integrity, and trust. Respect for self and others. Responsibility for personal actions and commitments. And it goes on. If we taught that in our homes, in our families, and school would be an extra bonus, we would not have this discussion today, in my opinion. So I want to bring that up because frankly, that awareness and starting at that level, in my opinion, is the ultimate answer to this issue.
I'm concerned that the NRA has donated thousands of dollars to each of you,
Okay?
and they are no longer a safety organization. How they started, they are there to sell guns and to maintain the ammunition and gun lobby. So will you guys not accept NRA funding?
So I'll tell you where Representative Harris is on this. So you saw me in the front of the paper, and as I have received more money from any candidate than anybody else in the NRA. Okay, I will not take the NRA money this election cycle. Okay, but it's don't clap. It's nothing. It's nothing, folks. You're lost. I thought it was a very false article on me, because the only reason I've taken the most money is I ran 2 elections before and lost, and the NRA gave to me. I've been the longest legislator up here, so I've ran more elections. So of course they've contributed to me more. But the idea that the public thinks that you receive a little money from an organization and that I'm going to lockstep vote with them, I think tells me that you don't think I'm your representative.
Well, I think
Shame on you.
when I look at
Shame on you, because that's not how it works. That's not how it works as a legislator. At least for me, it never has. Okay? So I've received some money from them. I won't take it this time. I want to be very pragmatic on gun bills. I really do. I don't own a gun. I don't own a gun. Never have. Probably never will. My brother, who's the doctor, has 40 of them. He loves to target shoot. Never shot an animal in his life. So I think we need to be very careful how we proceed. I voted no on the bump stock bill, and I wanted to vote yes because the bill is very poorly written. So to be quite frank with you, what the bill did was, if you moved into our state and you happen to have a bump stock on your gun and you didn't know that the law had changed in our state, you would be cited as a felon. Actually, that's in the bill. You would be a felon. I don't think any of us want that to happen. You confiscate their gun.
No,
Huh?
they confiscate.
Yeah,
the
they
stuff.
confiscate. So I think we need to be very pragmatic on it. I'm very pragmatic on these bills. I've heard you. I do believe we need to have tighter gun regulations. I will look at the magazine capacity.
Thank you.
I will look at certain things. I believe that we do need sensible gun regulations. But I think what you said is so true. There's 300 million guns out there, folks. There's 300 million guns out there. This is going to be I equate it to all the marbles are rolling around and you want me to gather up all the marbles. It'll be very difficult to do, but I will take a look at very common sense legislation on this.
Yes, I took NRA funds, and I'll tell you why I take NRA funds, and I will continue taking them because I support your Second Amendment rights, period. I don't own a gun. I have shot before just because I thought it would be interesting to try. I won't own a gun probably ever, but they are your Second Amendment rights. It is up to you whether you want to use them or not. And the one reason I can see that is a valid reason, some people may not agree, for a gun is for self-defense. If somebody is coming into your home and coming to attack your family and you have an opportunity to stop them and save your family or yourself, that is a valid reason to have a gun. My husband's here, we don't have one. You know, that's, and because the Second Amendment right is in the Constitution and it's yours to exercise or not, I'm going to protect that one, your First Amendment rights, and everything else that is in the Constitution to the best of my ability. So.
I'm a certified firearms instructor, so I did that so that I could go out and help teach the safety and use of a firearm, because it is important to me. And for the, what's interesting is that most of the classes so my two younger daughters are also firearms instructors, and it is women that come to us that want to have this protection. And sometimes it's because they've already been attacked and they don't want to be a victim again. And so there's got to be ways, we have to be able to allow people to defend themselves. Same here, they actually, when they reported that money, they said, we had this massive amount down in the 17th district. Well, in the last election that I ran, the maximum amount is $1,000 for your primary, $1,000 for the general election, and they actually gave me $950, so they didn't even give me the maximum amount that was allowed by law. Just the same amount that you can give me, or you can give me. So that's how much. I think that a lot of reasons why people donate money to us or contribute to our campaigns is not necessarily because they want us to believe in how they believe, but because we represent my beliefs. Maybe I take funding from businesses as well, because they understand that I feel business is important in Washington State, and I will support them and you know, try to reduce the regulations and rules that they have so that we can grow. So
and also, I want to make sure you understand, so I received money from the wine and beer industry. I don't drink, and in fact, I'm very tight on regulations on wine. And I sent the money back to them. But I want you to understand, so when you read things, you can't really, so even though I sent the money back, it still shows up on my PDCs because they sent me the money, they report it, I send it back, it still is reported on my PDCs that I received the money. There's not a reporting mechanism as an elected official that when I send money back, because nobody ever does that, there's no process for me to report that. So the same thing will be true, because the NRA most likely will send me money again, unsolicited. I will send it back to them, but it still will be reported that I accepted them. I think it's rather comical, to be quite frank with you. So I voted no on the budget for two major reasons, personally, Representative Harris. One, I wanted the property tax relief to be immediate. So I had heard from many of you that your property taxes have gone up, and I wanted that 30 cents to be immediate. I wanted it this year. I wanted them to cut you a check, and I wanted it in the mail. And because I really did want that, that would have cost a little more money. It would have to do that. But you're going to get property tax relief next year in the legislation that we passed, about 80 cents.
30.
No, 80 cents, no matter, no, it's 80 cents next year. It drops down 80 cents next year. And you're going to lose this 30 cents and that 80 cents, so it's going to go down about $1.10, which is substantial. But I wanted you to have the 30 cents today. I really did. I think politically, and honestly, for those of you that have sent me emails, I wanted you to have that money today. The other reason, what we did isn't sustainable, but it doesn't need to be, honestly, because it was a one-time fix. But I would have preferred to kept the money in the rainy day fund. That's just.
The first question I had was about local transportation, because it wasn't really covered in the meeting.
Correct.
Talk about some of the transportation funding for Clark County specifically in the transportation bill.
Well, there were some different aspects for transportation. I know there was about $2 million that was secured for Chalachi Bridge, and that is something that came through. Representative Pike worked on that, and that went through the legislature, which is, I think, great for her to be able to get that. And from transportation standpoint, one of the things I'll mention that I was hoping to get was a west of I-5 bridge consultative study done. And my hope was that as we looked at how can we really truly reduce congestion on that I-5 corridor, The west side is a quick way for us to look at moving commuters, freight off of the I-5 interstate and giving them a potential alternative west of I-5, getting them in or around Portland and down south in Oregon. It was a $300,000 consultative study. I was looking to get funded. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that through this year, but I will be looking at ways to move forward on that next session.
That leads to the next question, because you talked about this a little bit in the town hall, the tolling issue. Folks in your district and in Southwest Washington really concerned and watching that closely because of the impact that might have on people who live here and work in Oregon. Talk a little bit about your point of view on where that's going.
Well, not in the right direction, as Oregon and the Oregon legislature is looking at the proposal of tolling both the 205 and I-5 interstates. That basically starting from the Washington border and moving south. And obviously that would impact our commuters tremendously. The projects that were named in that proposal by the Oregon legislature last year basically identified projects that tolling monies would go toward that were south of Portland. So the majority of Southwest Washingtonians who are working in the Portland area, having to travel those roads, who would have to pay those tolls, would have zero value or any benefit even from those tolls. Now, I would prefer that we not see any tolling. Frankly, Oregon needs to manage their budget and their transportation funds better so that they can utilize those. They already get income tax from our citizens that work over there, and candidly, we don't need to be paying any extra.
The legislature this past session did pass a bill basically to start looking at replacement for the interstate bridge.
That's
again,
correct.
and at least ask Oregon to come back to the table. Oregon, as you'll remember, in their legislature a few years ago, passed funding for it. Washington at that time did not.
Right.
Do you expect that Oregon is likely to come back to the table at this point and maybe get something passed there?
Well, I will say this. I would hope that we can get Oregon to the table, if you will, and bring all of us together in Southwest Washington as legislators and Oregon legislators that are working on transportation issues. The reality is, no matter what solution you might want or not want, the truth is we have got to be able to work together. We are working as a bi-state, interstate region, and in order to make sure that our citizens are being served in the manner that they are asking for and want, we have to have, really, if you will, both parties at the table. And in this case, those parties are Southwest Washington legislators and Oregon legislators. So I'm not sure that right now they're ready to immediately start those discussions, but I do know there has been dialogue. I've reached out, certainly to Oregon colleagues to try to help that conversation forward. And, whether it's the situation, the proposal they're looking at, or, I-5 alternatives, such as I've mentioned, or even replacement of I-5, which I know is the bill last year that was passed by some other legislators. We have to be in a bi-state conversation. So I'm hoping we can do that and move it forward soon.
Final question, because it's cold out here. This was your second session, so just talk a little bit about kind of what you learned. You introduced 2 pages full of bills. None of them got passed this time around.
Reality check.
Yeah. So what do you take from that experience going into the next session that you hope might make you more successful in getting some of these bills through?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is kind of funny, really, when you think about, as a new legislator coming in last year, really didn't introduce a lot of bills, and then this year, 2 pages, right? And a lot of that either was from constituent feedback or issues that I felt were important as over the years, working with homeowners, property owners, trying to protect rights, work on behalf of small businesses. So to answer your question, one of the things I will absolutely look at doing differently moving ahead is not only looking at those bills, but certainly there's already some different ideas that have started coming in for next year, and really looking at how can I prioritize bills that I think will make a big difference in value for our citizens locally in the 17th Legislative District, but also is legislation that I feel like I can effectively move ahead. So I don't ever want to discard a piece of legislation because it may not move immediately, because sometimes things take time, but because every bill needs to be worked strategically as a legislator, all the way through the process, from introduction, through committee, through a House, through the Senate, and then, to the governor signing, a lot of time is required to do that successfully. So I will probably prioritize a little bit more moving ahead.
A lot of politicking in politics, right? You got to know who to go to and
I like to think of it as working together, and, working where we can together. Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate the time.